Hi, everybody. Today we have Mr. Saif straight from the Silicon Valley, a man who's worn many multiple hats. You're a founder of Startup Studios, which again, you're advising so many young people, startups as a mentor. You have led growth as well as many different, I think, strategic roles in different companies. You're a
Try to.
VC as well as a founder. So I feel like with all these experiences that you've had so far, I think there's so much learnings, like so many learnings in this whole process, in this journey that you've had. And I would really want to know more about, your successes as well as your failures, as well as all the learnings that you've had, Seth. I was also looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I honestly could not have really realized that you started off with a mechanical engineering background.
Yeah.
And then you jumped
Because
straight into this world of startups where you've not left, which I'm really glad
mm,
about. So yeah,
it's been a fun journey so far and hasn't ended yet. So no,
that's
thank you
great.
so much. I really appreciate you inviting me and giving me this forum
No,
to
it's an
just
honor for me,
speak
honestly.
about. No, I appreciate it. So I'm Seth, and thank you for that intro. It's kind of more overglorified than how things are, but I appreciate. I've just tried doing multiple things, right? And I've kind of come first generation American Pakistani. Parents moved here when I was I was born here. But then I also got a chance to move back to Pakistan for
Oh,
middle school and high school.
right.
So I kind of got both ends of the spectrum, just living here and there.
The
My
best of
dad
both
was
worlds.
always, yeah, yeah. And my dad was also, he went from a mechanical engineering master's directly into programming in the
Oh,
late
nice.
80s,
Okay.
worked at IBM. And so
Mhm.
I kind of got to see him mess around with computers, and I always knew I was going to go down that path. But as a computer programmer, I wasn't quite, as interested at the time because I was like, my dad just sits in front of a monitor all day.
Mhm.
So my next love at the time was cars. So that because my dad was also a mechanical engineer, I was like, okay, I need to be a little smart.
Yeah.
I have, thankfully I grew up very privileged. So I ended up getting into San Jose State University, and mechanical engineering was like, okay, if at the time I wanted to stick into automotives and
Yeah.
futuristic cars and
Mhm.
supercars, like let's go there. So,
Nice.
but when I graduated, I in between, right? I was never the engineering type. Like I used to get a lot of help from my friends in college, like just
It's
passing
always a
classes and
teamwork.
whatnot. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but on the business side, right, like especially in different projects that we would have to do, I would just take the lead because we're like, okay, I'm good at organizing stuff, and you
Mhm.
do this, you do that, or just tell me what you want
Yep.
to do, and we'll figure out the rest. So I would take that role and just be like, okay, what do you need help with? What do you need help with? Like, treat me as just a dumb person in the group and just give me all the grunt work. So that really got me kind of thinking like, okay, sales and business, right? As an engineer, like, oh,
Mhm.
they make fun of us, but let's see if there's some opportunities there.
Right.
So throughout college, I got to work in different roles, and I always tried to be very customer facing in
Mhm.
order to learn like, okay, I'm a brown person like in the US, but I never felt that way, thankfully, being in California, because
Yep.
growing up here, we had a lot of friends and family as well who looked like us. So it
Mhm.
was never an issue. In Pakistan as well, like I got there young enough to where I wasn't made too much fun of for being a burger boy, but otherwise just like a good set of friends and family there and here.
Nice.
So when I was studying at San Jose State, right, my junior year actually is when we just started randomly hanging out. I was in a fraternity. I had a fraternity brother from UCLA who I was very close with. And we were just kind of talking and hanging out. And we're like, we're hearing so much about these entrepreneurship and startups. Like, let's just think about it. Right. And we got a chance to. So Ron Conway, he's a humongous angel investor now.
Mhm.
One of the original like tech entrepreneur, like supporters in the world, right? And he was from San Jose State University. So I got lucky. I got to see him speak at just a free event. And he
Mhm.
was talking about like venture capital and how these new incubators and accelerators were launching out. And so when I graduated, actually, I was looking for mechanical engineering. We were going through the 2010, 11, like down economy. The
Mhm.
automotive industry was in a complete mess. So I should have probably looked into Tesla at the time, but I just was like, okay, I want to do something else. Let's look into
Yep.
business, right? So I fortunately got connected. So my fraternity bro and I, the first startup which we decided to work on together was called, I named it Denacom, so to give
Mhm.
communications, because at the time his mother unfortunately was suffering from terminal illness and she was stuck in the hospital.
Right.
So that was a big problem. We were like, okay, our loved ones are in the hospital. We want to communicate with them, right? Be able to communicate with them on the go. And this was when hospitals wouldn't allow cell phones. I mean, you wouldn't have smartphones at the time, but they wouldn't even allow other electronic devices because they would think, just like with airplanes, that they're going to interfere with, life-saving machinery. So we just went to the hardware store, got a couple of little, like an LCD panel, like a tiny microcomputer, and just built a hacked together prototype of a tablet computer. This was before the iPad came out. So it had a tiny keyboard, it had a tiny mouse like input. And like if you've ever watched The Bone Collector, it's an old movie with Angelina Jolie and Denzel Washington.
No, I have no
He
clue about this
plays
movie. Yeah.
he plays a paraplegic who's stuck on in a hospital bed.
Okay.
But he can control the computer using a straw mouse. I forget what the technical term. So we just have those inputs, like in case somebody has their hands, can use their mouth and just connect to the internet, right? And we went to different clinics. We told them like we're gonna just put this on some of your approved places and allow you to charge an hourly rate from customers who want to use it, whether it's for Facebook, email, etc. So right when we signed our first beta customer, Apple announced the iPad and their entire suite of hospital kind of stuff, right? So we're looking at each other as like 24, 25-year-olds, like, okay, this is too big for us. Like just we never incorporated, we were never a company or anything, we're just a startup, just two people.
Right.
And it's a little money here and there from myself and him. And we're like, okay, this is a good experience. Let's move on. But while I was doing that, like I was always on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has kind of been my saving grace. I was on LinkedIn just trying to find other people in the bio, like clinic, managers or doctors, etc., and just reaching out to them using the student card and saying, "Hey, I'm a student who's got this project in the works. I'm graduating next year. I would love, 5-10 minutes of your time over coffee or something." Because I was a student, most times, if you reach out to somebody older, they're gonna pay for coffee, so it wasn't that bad. So right, so through that process, I ended up meeting two fraternity bros of mine from another university, older, who had just sold the company to Microsoft. Like these guys had retired, by the age of 28, 29, super cool. Like, I got along with them. And so when I was working on the startup, they were kind of, helping out, just a phone call here and there. And when I called them and said, "Hey, we had to shut down and I'm looking for something new. And if you know of somebody, who could use like a mechanical engineering degree, like let me know." So they were in the process of like because they had sold their company, they were like, "Okay, incubators are cool. And we want to be able to just come up with our own ideas and just fund them with cool generalists." They were actually the first people who I ever heard use the term generalist ever. At the time I wasn't too happy about it being applied, but now I'm like, yeah, that's
now
exactly.
it's like the go-to, right?
Yeah. I mean, so while I was doing that, then they had me also work on the smartphone or phone cameras at the time really were bad. So for amateur photographers, they wanted a kind of it's called an intervalometer, which you can connect to your DSLR camera and have it take pre-configured like time-lapse photos.
Oh, nice.
So the ones that are sped up into, like thousands of photos into a few minutes. So we attempted to build an adapter like that for your phone so that you could take that, put your phone on a camera and be able to take time-lapse photos from wherever. Just as a, like before GoPro, this was kind of they wanted to go into that space.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I was like the first engineer working on that. We tried reverse engineering a couple of things. It didn't work. So they moved me on then to another project called Podly. And so if you've ever heard of Joe Rogan or the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yep.
So back when he first started, his first 389 episodes, I actually sat through, listened through every episode and had to document anything that he talked about. like anything that unique that we could link back to either Amazon or eBay or Wikipedia as an information database for his episodes. Like for people who are just listening, right? They wanted to go back and be like, okay, he talked about, say, Anunnaki or XYZ or UFC fighters. Like we want to learn more about it, right? We were trying to fit into that affiliate space where they click into it. If they purchase something, we would get a cut. So I worked on that for about 6 months as well. Unfortunately, they decided, like, I was with the team for about 10 months in Austin before moving back, trying to work remotely. The founders decided to shut down the incubator and moved on to some other like big crypto projects. So they're huge in that space.
To be honest,
But then,
like, so far, Seth, like every project that you've mentioned seems like you guys started it way ahead of time, right? Like whether
this was my first 9 months after college. Like
Saif, it's also about you saying yes to all these opportunities, right? Which matters a lot.
yeah, again, so the people on the other side of the table, right? The people who offered me those opportunities, like there's no way that I could even highlight just how badass they are. Like when you talk advisors, when you talk mentors, right? Like these are people who people today would spend thousands of dollars an hour trying to meet or connect with. And I got a chance to actually work in the trenches with them, like through the good, through the bad. And they trusted me, right? Like as a at this point at F50, I was so 29 years old.
Right.
So, this is 4 or 5 years of just trying to grind and trying to find my way.
Whenever I hear about VCs investing in startups, and everybody has these different tickets that they invest in, right? Again, depends on whether it's just an idea, somebody has a pilot project, MVP, has customers, no customers. It really depends on the different phases. But then I'm just trying to understand how the VC side works. Like how as a VC do you like choose the startups that you're going to invest in, and how do you like come up with like that amount that, okay, this is what I'm going to ask for and this is how much I'm going to get in return? So how do you do that?
Okay, so there is a formal version and there's an informal version.
Got it.
Okay, so in Pakistan at the time, it was more of an informal version. So because of Nadim's background, and also Nadim would just straight up say, like, listen, I'm gonna give capital, but then you also have my access, which in Pakistan, Nadim's access is phenomenal, right? And some people agree or can agree or disagree with this, but at the time, like we heard of deals from people saying, we're gonna offer you $5,000 for 90% of the company. And our sweet spot, though, we wanted, at least for 10XC, my sweet spot was I never want to own more than 20%.
That's fair. That's fair.
At Planet N, we had a different approach. For companies that came to us with nothing, where it was just an idea, where Nadeem was going to be a co-founder, he would get co-founder equity. But if it's a company that's already existing, that's already doing some traction, and they're taking capital, and they can see a clear need for, by Nadeem being on the board or by Nadeem helping with selling some of these, like, this is what the advantage could be. He would justify that, or Planet N would justify getting a few more points into that. Some VCs today may complain and whatnot, but again, at the time in 2016, we were one of the only first checks in companies more than like $50,000, $100,000. Everybody else, some of them could have been predatory, you say, or some of them could just be straight up acqui-hires. We were like, we want to treat this like and so I mean that was the mission for Planet N, right? And even the people that we brought on, like we had some amazing founders who we just tried to recycle what their expertise was into future, growth for our company.
Amazing.
So because I was so close to our Planet N portfolio companies as well, and a lot of the partnerships that I was building for 10XC, like AWS for startup, Microsoft, etc. Like I was bringing in for Planet N. So eventually Nadeem asked me to also have visibility on the Planet N side. I was on the investment committee. I used to, try to solicit not only pre-seed, seed, Series A kind of pitch decks. I personally reviewed maybe 9,000 proposals just in Pakistan over those 4 years, and which is a lot of fun, right?
Out of 9,000.
So out of 9,000 between 10XC and Planet N, I was with the team through 42 investments. 42 individual teams, like that we invested in at different stages. A lot of them didn't work out. Next
question as well, Saif. Sorry to cut you off, but then, like in terms of, let's say, 42 out of 9,000 applications, like proposal in a sense, right? What made you choose these 42? Like, was it about the idea? Was it about the founding team? Like, how do you pick these ideas that
So
you can invest your money in?
our investment committee at the time, because so Planet N, this was right at the beginning, right? Nadeem had started with his own money, and then we raised some, like it was maybe from a VC standpoint, it was a small, like $7 million fund at the time.
Right.
So because of the profiles of the people we had raised from, some of them we brought onto the investment committee, like Nazar Noor, amazing person. We had a couple of others like in insurance, in fintech, or in banking, etc. So we would always try to get their feedback, but in most cases, right, anybody who's of a certain kind of profile or experience, they will never be able to judge a startup, in my opinion, like fairly. So the yay or nays that they would give, we would try to do the opposite. To be fair, not trying to be rude or like discounting them, but the moonshots, right, that we were trying to take was very much like, okay, we're just imagining up what the vision, the future could be, and whether this could be an amazing thing for customers in Pakistan, it could be amazing for people outside of Pakistan. Let's see. And also, our unfair advantage was Nadeem's visibility. Like, as a, his coach persona at the time, or I mean, not a persona, he lives and breathes it.
Yep.
Even for our portfolio companies, he was like, I'm always available. And as a co-founder, as a mentor advisor, and even as somebody who hadn't ever done business in Pakistan, I could not have ever asked for a better partner. Like you never, like the fears that you have, right, coming from the US to Pakistan and thinking like, hey, I don't want to deal with all this other BS. Never once had to, like, it was always work, and that's exactly what I wanted as well. Like, just focus and do work. So for about 3.5 years, 42 investments, and a lot of ups and downs. 10xc, unfortunately, of the 19 investments I made, and I take full responsibility. There's only one that actually survived. We folded them into Planet N, and they're called PyPy. They're basically trying to be TurboTax, a tax software for Pakistan.
Okay.
The other 18, for various reasons, amazing people, amazing portfolio. I couldn't take them over the next over their next milestones, and they all shut down or closed down for various reasons. So
and what's your biggest
once that happened,
these days, Saif? Like, what has been your biggest learning out of this whole 3 years that you had?
So for VC from the early stage side, I think if you are an entrepreneur who's under 30, at some point you have to just stop asking for advice and just do it. That was, for not only myself, because there was a lot of imposter syndrome again, right? Where I was like, I feel like I've kept failing up. A lot of companies have shut down. Some companies have done well. But, even as a VC, I was a number 2 to Nadeem. But that's how I saw it. Like, hey, I don't deserve this. I'm not, he's the final say so, but I felt so comfortable to make mistakes and be able to just run with it, right? I could use his name whenever I wanted. I could, do whatever I wanted at any time. I never needed to ask for permission or anything. And getting that trust and that kind of, level of respect from somebody who's nearly twice her age in Pakistan is nearly unheard of. So, like he really helped me not only deal with my own imposter syndrome, but also learning like, hey, Seth, like you've gone through these experiences before, and despite all of that, you're still getting stuck right now, right? Which means what? Like just to take action, like whatever's coming to mind, you have resources, just go figure it out or experiment. And there, like we tried some moonshots as well, like all the national incubation centers in Karachi. We applied for the ones in Karachi. We didn't win, unfortunately, but we were partnering with IBM for that, which alone was a fantastic experience.
Exactly.
Having like the managing director of IBM in Asia, like sitting down and like, hey, how do we support entrepreneurs and early stage startups? It's like, oh my God, thank you. So those kinds of things, being able to work with other corporations like Jazz, like all the big telcos, all the big banks in Pakistan, a lot of universities just creating entrepreneurship programs. And so it like 4 years in Pakistan for somebody like me who had also kind of tried building something from scratch in Silicon Valley, it was a dream come true. And a lot of amazing founders and a lot of amazing things came out of there. But after 4 years there, and then so Planet N also, our interest was also to raise as a VC fund, right, in Asia. And we had some companies, like we were doing business in Egypt, in London, in Dubai. Yeah, a lot of like same model, right? Get
Yeah.
these smart people in Pakistan
Mhm.
who are building these new technologies, and the Kareem had kind of shown that there's so much
Yeah.
overlap between the other Middle Eastern countries and Asian countries with Pakistani tech. So we're just like, okay, let's export whatever we can.
True.
So
I
even
think Tintin's
there's a
journey has been like exemplary, honestly.
it's just, again, like I just found myself lucky and fortunate to latch on with other very exemplary people. So
Yeah.
so after 4 years of running it with Planet N, then so my interest was always to stay in VC, but then I was also interested to go back into operations side, like go back into co-founding a company and
Right.
figuring stuff out again, like just
Mhm.
focus on one thing. That's one thing which I could, if I could tell my younger self, like
Mhm.
I tried, and that was kind of the Pakistani, the Desi mentality, like, you have to hedge your bets. But if
Mhm.
the first 5, 7 years of my experience, if I had like focused and stayed with some very smart people, things could have been very different. But
Mhm.
like thankfully, whatever has happened, I'm very, very
Yeah,
happy
for
with.
sure, for sure.
But so yeah, so Planet N, he was getting a lot more interest on the private equity side in Pakistan, and I was like, I'm out. I wanted to move back. I'm from San Jose. My
Mhm.
wife and I were like, we had
Right.
a fantastic time. And I was the only one in my family to actually move. I had nobody there. I had my extended family, but my parents both in San Jose, my sister in San Francisco. I had like, yeah, I just went for work, and
Mhm.
a lot of people ask me like, hey, why'd you move from California to Pakistan, like, and did this, like, why? And for me, it was just, again, being the opportunity that Planet N offered, the opportunity to again try to build something from
Mhm.
scratch, and something that could last. Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience. So after I left Planet N, when I was moving back, I started startup studios, kind of like my own consulting firm. Like I do get access to a lot of early stage companies, and
Mhm.
it's very fun for me. So that's how I found Delta Leaf. They do plant genetic testing. I was with an advisor for them for 3 months, and then they offered me co-founder position as COO. I was doing that for about 18 months until last month.
Right.
And then the company's going in an amazing direction. I thought it was my time to move on.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's just all over, right? So uh
But like a
so
full
having
on like journey, man. Like
yeah,
seriously.
yeah. What I use now to find my next opportunities.
Mhm.
So team has to be number one, who I can either learn from
Mhm.
or who I can assist in some way, like serve the community. It has to have an amazing mission. Like
Mhm.
companies can make money all left and right. And actually in Silicon Valley, if I had just been around, I could have, found like other awesome opportunities too. But that's like, whether you want to find your own strengths, which is your identity, which is your
Yes.
background, which is
Yep.
your own
Mhm.
communities, right? That could even be sports or entertainment related, right?
Mhm.
Um, they have always been a big part of like just me finding stuff to do or finding interesting things, and that don't be afraid. Like being Pakistani as well, like I'm American. I grew up here. I did, it's kind of no different than like if like military kid growing up in a different country coming back. I
Mhm.
I I have that. I speak the language. I have friends and family. Like I'm totally 50-50 American Pakistani,
Mhm.
but still there are so many sub communities where I find them today, even like just talking to new people, where it's like, okay, if I as a mental note, that's literally my hack. I
Mhm.
just will reach out to them and be like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm trying to do, or this is what I'm looking for. Is
Wow.
there anybody here who is in the same boat? Let's talk.
Mhm.
And that to me, just being open, like
Mhm.
nowadays I've been a lot more vulnerable online, just
Mhm.
like
I
just show
really
people
wanted to
that,
talk to you about that as well.
yeah.
I love it so much. No, honestly, seriously.
I
And
appreciate
because again, like you mentioned earlier as well, LinkedIn can be this whole like, like a facade as well.
yeah. No, but
And
yeah,
because
everybody's trying to put their best foot
their best,
forward, right?
best
But
foot forward.
also like
But
for
I
for
think,
somebody in
yeah.
my position, actually, and the reason why I want to do this is also like
Mhm.
to provide an example for other people who are also trying to find early stage companies to work
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
Like you know over glorification of, you know, the exits, or hey, I'm with a startup, and I've gone through that actually. I have friends and family who today, during the startup years, right, when I felt like I was on top of the moon, I had a humongous ego, I had access to everything, like, yeah, my business is doing so amazing, like, you know, on social media, but inside it hurts. And that's also one a thing that I bring, as you know, as a supporter of startups, is to remind them, like, hey, unless you are serving some customers, you know, in some way, whether you're making money in revenue or you're making some other engagement, if you're not doing that, then it's not a bad thing that you're a startup. But come on, there's only so far that you can be, you know, in this position, in this mindset, and there's so many ups and downs, right? Like, a lot of people aren't able to, like, manage their emotions in a good way. A lot of people turn to other things, you know, to try and manage, like, the wins and misses. Like, even for me, posting lately has been more of like trying to not only highlight like what I've done to try and attract, you know, the next company or the next co-founding team, but then also like to show people, like, listen, I've already gone through some of these, you know, these situations, and I can relate to them, whether that means, you know, like, it's kind of naive, right? Like, people like me, I believe, as a generalist, we fit in a very small box with startups, because everybody, when you outgrow a certain area, you want specialists, or at least you want to turn your generalists who have been with the company into a more of a specialist, or, like, you know, focus on this role. But for somebody like me who's trying to showcase that from the outside and be like, you know what, I can come in, understand your, not right away, but, you know, just like with Delta Leap, for a year and a half, the first couple of months, 6 months, I didn't even use the co-founder tag, because I was like, I'm still learning. And I did that by just being on customer service. I was on phones, emails every day. Like, tell me, right? Like, what, and as a generalist operator, or as a COO rather, that is also like, customer success is a big part of it. Like, not only customer success from the outside, managing internal team members, the culture, but then also the external, like, you have partners, you have third-party vendors, you have investors, right? How do you create a program that manages these individual communities? So it's like, that is kind of what I do now for Startup Studios. But because, like it's like, the disclaimer I give to everybody I speak to is, I'm not an advisor. I'm not a successful entrepreneur in any way. I work with many successful people, and because of the lessons I've learned from them, I am able to kind of help, you know, some like pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies with what to focus on, what metrics, what, you know, how to grow from, whether it's 5 people to 20 people, or whether it's 20 people to 40 people, right? That's an entirely different phase of growth that either I can kind of sit down and talk to the founders and understand the story, and just offer, you know, my thoughts based on what I've gone through. But then, despite my failures, I have been very blessed to work with amazing people, right? Whether they're successful founders, whether they're service providers, they were at Apple, Google, like, working with entrepreneurs. And now I just get to connect them, like, through Startup Studio. So I call myself more of like that kind of matchmaker, right? A desi term, where if you're a founder, you tell me what you're looking for, and you know, in most cases, if they're able to afford it, I can get them very, very, like, experienced people who are on an hourly basis or for equity. And even in cases where they don't afford it, right? There's so many people, and that's one of the biggest things from Silicon Valley, which, you know, in emerging markets, any young entrepreneur should try to find as many networks as possible, but with the goal of asking specific questions. Because otherwise, you can also kind of go down that rabbit hole of just meeting people and thinking you're being smart and getting value, whereas really, it's entirely your responsibility what to get out of those people, right? So if you're focused on an idea, or if you don't have an idea, just go and ask and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. You don't have to prove yourself later on in the interview stage, but just say, like, manifest it for yourself, like, I want this, and go
Do you
reverse
believe
it.
in manifestation, Saif?
Lately, just because, like, I've never been religious, I've never really been spiritual either, but, you know, now as I grow older, right, like, I see the need where, because I have limited time and I want to focus more on my family, like, my wife, my parents and stuff. And, the hustle culture, some people love it. I personally, I just can't keep up with it. Your mental and physical kind of wellness at some point, right? Like for me, they just, for the last year, they've been a pretty high priority for me. But otherwise, like, going back to your point, like it's different for different people.
Very true.
Like, and everybody has to kind of find their own path. Like, even I still have this issue so far where, some people who are very close to me, they're giving me a lot of advice and, a lot of like data from love. Well, I'm like, it doesn't really relate to what I'm doing because of this, right? But, like if you talk about startups, like there's so many different forms of entrepreneurs, but I feel like if you can narrow down like what you're working on into a certain industry or a certain bucket, and just try to find those entrepreneurs, ask them about, and people who are actually building. There's so many people who have, who come from very stellar backgrounds, but who have never like built something from scratch. Ask, like, if you go and ask them, like, hey, what's it like to raise a first round of funding, or what is it like to have a prototype that absolutely sucks, that customers are gonna leave you 1-star reviews on, like over and over again until you get it right? Like, what's that like? Most people will never be able to tell you, because like they will never have had that negative review. They've never had that critical feedback where a customer will literally say, you suck, I'm never working with you again, and get off my lawn, or get off my property. So it's those, a lot of those no's, and a lot of like figuring out and iterating, right? It's a constant experimentation game.
I love
and
that.
your co-founders,
I honestly really like you mentioned that, because again, it comes down to the normal, the question that people in their 20s ask, around, where like, how do I find a mentor? But the first question comes from like, what do I need a mentor for? Right. And again, like those buckets, and okay, do I need it for my financial well-being? Do I need it for my mental health? Anything else? And then you go looking out for these people who've sort of, had an experience or a journey in that field, and then you go up to them and ask those questions, because again, they have that experience, right? So it's really good to do that.
For me, then also because of my work at Planet and at startups, right? So I also at least got to see, I mean, I could be wrong, but at least some mentor profiles who aren't good mentors, right? And so when I saw them, and now I try to use that myself as a baseline, where it's like, you don't say stuff like that, because either you haven't done it, or you don't have that experience, etc. But otherwise, like, see, depends on the stage of the entrepreneur again. If you have already gone through the rounds of trying to ask a lot of questions and try to launch something, right? And give somebody a product with the intention of them paying you for it, or giving you something in exchange for it, then you eventually you understand that the questions that you are asking have to be very pointed, and have to be like, you can keep them open-ended, but then eventually your open-ended, like, loose questions are also going to get you very loose answers, which can be another distraction in their own right. Like even for myself, right? For Delta Leaf, I know that if I get stuck with a particular problem, thankfully I have an entire network of people who I can just either post on LinkedIn randomly, and I encourage startups to do this. Depending on if your IP is something very, very secret, like, fine, be very careful about what information you get, but otherwise 9 times out of 10, whatever the exact thing that you were working on, somebody else has already tried or failed, or is currently working on it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with giving away information. I don't think there's anything wrong with showing vulnerability, that, hey, I'm a young entrepreneur, I do not know this stuff, but I need to figure it out. Can somebody, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes or 30 minutes, or I'll buy you coffee or dinner or whatever, or just say like, hey, I'm broke, but I can give you, 0.1% of my company, or 0.01% for every hour that you give me of advice for the next year. And that's really powerful. You do 0.01% times 100 meetings. That's 1% of advice. You spread those out, and you build a relationship with a mentor, right? Like, it's just it's asking these questions. And regardless if you're a student, I am doing it now, actually. So not only going back to my existing network, right, and telling them like, hey, for example, I am looking for work, or I'm looking for the next thing. So I've also done a couple of different rounds of those, like just experiments, right? So I did it with loosely with people who I know semi well, but who are in newer industries, which I don't know much about. So I can ask them open-ended questions. But once I went through those rounds and then I narrowed down my messaging, I'm like, okay, now when I go to my best people, I know that I need to just ask them like, hey, I'm looking for a startup that has raised, this much money minimum, and is a small team but is looking for a generalist or a COO who can do this. And then it's a lot easier for them to like, hey, copy paste, send it to whoever, and make that introduction. And as you go through those experiments, right? It's like I take a lot of loose notes. I don't write it down. It's usually like a notepad file or something. Lately, I've started trying to organize your own work as a business or as a startup. And I mean that is kind of an egotistical way of saying it, because even if you've never done a startup, right, it's just organization. So for me, I like the new people who I speak with, I try to keep notes. I have a CRM that telling me like, I met this person here, I met this person there, and just trying to send me insights like, oh, like Sunny, we connected today, but a year from now, oh my God, you're doing this. It's amazing, right? Like, how can I help? These kinds of things really, really help. And
Yeah.
if you are an entrepreneur who's struggling and you don't know, like if like the way I try to justify it to myself is, if I'm focusing on one thing, whether it's a company or let's say a product, right? Then how do I help my customer? Like, just stay focused on the people who have already given you their time and effort and money towards something that you would promise them. Like, if you just stay focused on that, everything else, like, it's very difficult because you feel the need, like, oh, I need to raise money, I need to go talk to these people, I need to build partnerships and blah blah blah. None of those matters. All they're gonna do, you have a finite amount of time every day, every month, and your startup will always be ticking down towards like the end of a bomb. You're always just, it's a race to like one of my old co-founders, Elijah from Delta Leaf, he had the best analogy he found somewhere, where starting or building a company is like you're falling down, like you've skydived, your parachute failed, and you're trying to build the parachute on the way down. Right? Like building from scratch on the way down.
Wow.
Right. So if you take it like that, and you realize like, but maybe if you do need to try like network or reach out to new people, limit yourself. Like either have that specific goal, like I'm doing this for a job, I'm doing this for money, I'm doing like money as an investment or money as a customer. Like if you can't quantify it quantify it to a specific kind of goal, it's probably just an open-ended one, which is also fine, but have those in a more finite time. Like I try to budget about 2 hours a day, which is just open on my calendar for brand new companies. Like it's 20-minute intro, and if you need more time, I'm willing to go up to an hour if I'm also interested, right? Because there's so like some companies I come up with who have just like come up with an idea brand new, they haven't done anything, not even a website yet. And some companies that they've been building in the trenches, like just like Delta Leaf, how I found them. It was a small team of 4 people who had just been building, and had grown to, a few $100,000 a year in revenue. And now they're like, hey, we are ready for phase 2 of our growth. And for that, we need help. And that's like, okay, either I or somebody in my network we can help you, or I can guide you towards how to find that help. And it really, it's just like
last questions, because again, we're short on time. We just have 5 minutes after this meeting. I really would want to know, because you did touch upon imposter syndrome before, and being a founder or a VC kind of sort of puts you in a public eye, right from a position where you might not even have a clue of what you're doing next, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of scrutinizing from people who you don't know, people who you want to live up to their expectations. So there's a lot of, like back and forth sort of like questionnaire that you have inside your head, because you have so many expectations.
Because you're supposed to be a thought leader, and now you're like, oh my God, I don't even know this, right? So
so
to
how
that
do
end,
you like deal with that as a person, and what advice do you have for like people who want to become a founder? Because it is sort of glorified, the wins like we talked about before, but there's a journey that goes behind all those wins. So
the way I deal with it now, and so I don't plan on ever becoming a VC again, for example, unless inshallah I get a big win and I'm able to create my own fund with my friends, like not professionally dealing with other LPs. When I was a VC, it was expected of me. Like I had to make noise. I had to invite entrepreneurs, right? In many cases, startups with way better experience than me to pitch them like, hey, you should take our money for this reason. And that was difficult in certain times because for a certain kind of profile, absolutely, right? I can talk to a founder left and right and be like, yeah, you went through this, so did I. And the other kinds of profiles, it turns into like, oh, like don't say anything, or rather like push them off to your other co-founders, right? So I would send them to Nadeem or to our other portfolio co-founders, and I had that advantage. At startups, I didn't. At startups, it was all myself, my co-founders, just trying to meet anybody and everybody and saying, "Hey, we're so awesome! You should join us, or you should invest in us. You should join our program. You should do this for this reason." Blah 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 blah. Right? And even now I get some friends and some people who I really admire who told me like, yo, you came off as a big douchebag back then. And I'm like, well, you kind of understand, right? Like, but you have to do it. And so I'm at this interesting phase of my life now where it like the imposter syndrome around things that I've done don't really affect me much, because I know like those experiences have helped me understand that any new experience that I go through, I can figure out somehow. And I don't need to know what the end is. Like whatever happens, it's up to God, or it's up to fate or whatever. But then if I'm gonna speak loudly, like every entrepreneur should speak. Every co-founder, I believe, should start journaling, should start writing about their emotions. It's not only a way for them to get therapy when they can't afford therapy, but it's also a way for them to communicate or get better at communicating, not only to people who don't know you, so potential customers, investors, but also the people who do know you, for them to understand better where you are coming from. So for entrepreneurs, my biggest way of dealing with imposter syndrome is to only focus on the content or the end goal that I am looking for. So right now with Startup Studios, I only speak about my previous experience, like things that I've dealt with, good and bad. If I was the co-founder of another company right now, if it was a particular just product, to get over your imposter syndrome, only talk about your product, only talk about your customers, only talk about what the company is doing. And that can be easy. You don't have to post daily, but as a way of just attracting customers, right? Like the imposter syndrome, don't let it stop you from achieving a goal. And maybe an imposter syndrome also comes from having too many spread out goals. And then thinking like, oh my God, if I can't do one thing, how am I expected to do the rest? So, every time when I've had imposter syndrome, maybe 3 times where, for 6 months to a year, I just wallowed in my sadness and, thought about saying something or, just whatever, right? But you can get out of it by just baby steps, really focusing on your health. And that, your point before, like now that's why my mental and physical health is so important, is because like I don't want to waste any more time worrying about that kind of stuff.
One last question, because again, you mentioned community and network. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I really want to get the most out of this because I
appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I really appreciate it so much.
Like
it's about creating a network, right? But I really want to understand the challenges of maintaining a network, because it's very different and very
it feels that way, yes. And so again, as somebody who I've been fortunate again to where I've been able to connect with some very successful people just on LinkedIn and stuff, like just through my writing or through my work, who I've never met in the past, right? For example, if I'm starting a company, right, or like I'm trying to pitch something, if I'm trying to get feedback for customers or for investment, like readiness, then I will just very unashamedly message him, just even if I don't know him. But if we're connected on LinkedIn, for example, and I usually very rarely send out requests, like again, I just kind of get a lot of connection requests. And if there's somebody in there, like if, for example, for Delta, right, we were fundraising, we were like, okay, I'm focused on trying to fundraise for this one company. I will go through my network. Anybody who seems loosely affiliated or who may seem like they can make an introduction, I will come up with a very short message like, hi, I'm working on this. This is about the company. This is what I'm trying to raise. Do you know anybody, or is this of interest? Can we talk more about it? That's it. and it's like 30% where somebody will respond back.
Mhm.
The other 70% sometimes will be like, no, it's not a fit, or won't even respond, right? Which is completely fine. And that to me, I've done so many times now
Mhm.
that some of them they will like unfollow you or like remove the connection. And I have realized that it's a very small percentage compared to the overall pool, because again, it comes down to what you're asking, right?
True.
And the if you're like the people that I'm asking to review a pitch deck or to invest are a very specific kind of profile.
Mhm.
So and they're used to people who can just quickly come in from their network and ask, or at least give them an indication like, hey, why should I even spend another second thinking
Mhm.
about you? So like, for me, the easier way of doing it is, instead of doing the mass, like,
Mhm.
everybody, like, I try to segment them. Like, I have my tier one, like, these are my board of advisors. These are the people who I love and trust, and they know me the most.
Right.
And I can go to them for anything. Even if I look like a complete idiot, I can go to them and ask them for feedback. Then there's a tier two, which are people who I very highly respect and admire, but who do not know me well. Maybe they're very like from one degree of separation, or maybe they saw me at one point in my career, and they decided to send me a connection or whatever.
Mhm.
The third tier then are the people who I know well, who are loosely like or not well, but who I've worked with, who know me professionally, but I don't feel as close to just
Mhm.
sending like, hey, how's it going, like we
Yeah.
haven't stayed in touch, here I am. Like
Yeah.
and I've learned like there's like less than 1% of the people who I've reached out to like this over 12 years in different cases. And I've reached out to them for some stupid, like really spammy kind of stuff too. Like where combined with a name like mine, right? Where they're thinking like, dude, is this somebody from Pakistan or India who's just like trying to, scam me right now? And despite that, I feel like fewer than 5%
Mhm.
of all the people who I've ever messaged have really like it has it negatively impacted my relationship with it.
Right.
And that could just be me, but or maybe I just use it as an excuse to continue spamming them.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's like now, once you go through the cringe moments, right, where you're like, oh my God, like this person, I thought for sure he was gonna get back to me, and he hasn't. Okay, I have to rethink this next time, or
Right. Yep.
and like I've gone through the rounds of trying to apologize profusely to people as well. It's like, yo, I'm sorry for wasting your time. I'm sorry for this. Like it didn't work out. But in startups, and even like once you get like just in life in general, right? People are so busy with other stuff. People are
Yeah.
so like just
True.
focus on their own stuff, right? Like I've realized like even if somebody did not respond or did not reply, don't take it personally.
Mhm.
And it's happened with me too. Like there's so many people who reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever, I just can never get back to, because again, finite amount of time a day, right? So in that case, the kind of way that I filter it out is by saying, okay, if they have responded to me, or if they respond to me, I have to be ready with next steps, because otherwise I really am wasting their time. And that too, I've gone through the rounds of like whether it's asking somebody for a job referral or asking somebody for an investor info. But I just reach out and say, hey, so and so, or I'm doing so and so, or can you make an introduction? Within 5 minutes, they already responded, made the intro, and now I'm sitting there like, like
Yeah.
I need to spend a couple of hours actually figuring this out and
Mhm.
getting ready for that next meeting, right? So
Wow.
the more you can kind of prepare beforehand,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be too like, you're not trying to think 10 steps ahead, you're just trying to think 1 or 2 steps ahead, right?
Mhm.
And the more you can make that organized, and it doesn't have to be nice or sexy or even functional, it can just
Yep.
be something. Putting that into
Mhm.
feedback and then into the next step, right, can be very, very like it just for somebody like me who has to deal with a lot of anxiety and sometimes like
Mhm.
project overload.
Yep.
It can be just like, okay, focus on that next step. And
Right. That's amazing advice.
so yeah, even from the network standpoint, doesn't matter if you're old, whether you're young,
Mhm.
you just use a different strategy. If you're younger, you're still in college, say you're a student. If you're older and you're looking for a career change, or you're looking for a change, just say that like, hey, I've been in health tech or in this kind of
Mhm.
industry for 20 years, and you know what, I'm looking for a change. Your profile came up to me as, hey, you are doing exactly what I wish I could do. how can I, like, can you share just like this, right? Share your story.
I
And
love
tell
that.
me, like,
Yeah.
to be honest, like most of the advisors, mentors, and people that I ever found, whether for myself or my communities, has always just been asking, like they threw up a signal in the air, whether it was a post or whatever, and I just messaged them or commented like, that is so cool.
I
That is
love
amazing.
that. I love that.
Like, I want to learn more. I want you to tell me how cool you are. That's it. And it's also a hack, right? For especially for early stage entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Use it. If you are dealing with people who are past a certain kind of success or a certain age, they rarely ever get the chance to talk like this
True.
about themselves or about what they've done, and get somebody on the other end who's as energetic as you are to be like, what? Like, tell me more. I don't want this to end. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and that is, if you can initiate that kind of feeling for somebody, right? They will spend hours with you. They will try to open their own book with you for you. Sometimes they will open their wallet for you. And there's nothing else really more than that. Like, you know, but for example, if I can do it for a small list of VCs or investors who I know, right? And I get, if I get some startups who I think could be a fit, I will still email it to them and be like, hey, it could be a fit, it couldn't be a fit. Some of them would never even respond to me, but I will still continue doing it until they either say no or they indicate to me like, hey, Saif, like this isn't working out. Because like the art of the follow-up, I feel like actually that's still something I've struggled with very, very much. Is, well, if you are reaching out to somebody and asking them for advice or whatever, right? It's up to you to follow up with them months later and just like that's where the investor update is actually another hack for entrepreneurs. Even if you don't have any investors, create a monthly blog post. This month we did this, and next month, like what we've learned, and this what we need to improve on. And then next month, write it again. And literally, that is the only thing that investors ask for. Once they write you a check, like, give me a monthly update. You just copy and paste that same thing. I've noticed a lot of Y Combinator's new companies, actually, because I follow a lot of their new startups and their new founders. They encourage people to do that.
Very
They're
true.
like, right, but you know, don't give away like any proprietary info or confidential info. You can just write like, oh yeah, you know, this month I tried interviewing 10 customers. 3 of them told me to F off. 7 of them said, you know, hey, you guys are working on something awesome, but only 1 of them paid. That is data. It doesn't have to be sexy or anything, but it's just information that if an investor who's interested in that space can see, or a customer who could use your solution can see, right? Or it could just be somebody out there completely random who's neither, but could it just finds what you're doing super cool and could make an awesome future team.
Exactly.
And
Oh
so
my God.
just putting yourself out there, like, in any way, shape, or form, even if you look like an idiot. Every single time when I post, I feel like either I'm unworthy of sharing this information, that I've never experienced, you know, hit a kind of level of success that other people more worthy of sharing this would be, or that maybe I'm just sounding super dumb or stupid, and that, you know, oh my God, like, what will other people who respect me and admire me, what will they think, right? Like, am I gonna go from right here, which is basically like, you know, hey, he's okay. Like, you know, he's somebody who I can reach out to if I need help, but otherwise, like, you know, whatever. From like, oh my God, like, Seth is an idiot, like, you know,
Oh,
he's a
come on.
talker, blah, blah, blah. No, it happens, right? It goes, especially it just whether it's imposter syndrome, whether
Very
it's an
true.
entrepreneur thinking they can't do it, or whether it's somebody like me who's like, oh my God, I've gone through so many startups, I haven't done anything properly yet, and now I need to go find a job and deal with recruiters and blah, 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 right? Everybody is dealing with their own demons and with their own fears. So it's just go for it.
But a live reader review from my end to someone who
Yeah.
does look at your posts and reads them as well. They're absolutely amazing. Honestly, it's the vulnerability that shows, and you can relate to it so much more. And I really, honestly really appreciate that so much. So thank you for that.
Well, no, I appreciate you reaching out and, you know, allowing me to share my story in, you know, a safe and fun environment, because, you know, it's not always easy. And, you know, again, coming from a standpoint of like, there's so many other people out there who are doing so many more amazing things, where it's like, okay, you know, I don't fit in that category at all. So I appreciate you still giving me this one.
No, for sure. I can imagine like so many people literally, like I really hope that people watch this because there's just so much learning, like seriously, from where you started and also the little details that you've shared, you know, from one startup to
I
the next,
appreciate
and then the VC, and then Pakistan, and then cultural differences.
it.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, but you know, again, like if uh, the underlying thing though, and one thing which I've been thinking about a lot recently. So again, I am a very privileged founder, where again, you know, like even when I was broke or when things were bad, I had amazing investors who never like came back to me or like, hey, you made the wrong decision. Like they made me make mistakes. I
Right.
had an amazing family and support network of friends, and you know, my parents, for example, my you know siblings, who like the people who are very closely related to you inadvertently do more for your startup than you do. And that's something which my wife recently, like, you know, with Delta Leaf as well, she was like, hey, like, you know, they're hurting just as much as you are doing your startup. So it's very important to keep them in the loop. Sometimes, like, you know, my parents, my dad is the smartest person I know. He understands processing and system. And he's a developer, right? So any app or website I tell him about, he's like, do this or do that.
Wow.
I can't go to him and be like, hey, I'm working on this, I'm working on that, because it's just a different dynamic. Right. And same with my mom. It's like, oh, I don't want to explain this to you. I'm doing some big stuff. Like, you know, when something will happen, I'll tell you guys.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like those relationships keep you very grounded, and
Right.
you know, like from a like you can tell yourself anything, right? Whether it's like something that's completely true, like I'm doing this for this, or even from a marketing standpoint, like people, you know, like, oh, I'm doing this for money. There's nothing wrong with saying that. There's no like people like again, I came up privileged. I never had to struggle, or you know, thankfully my parents struggled a lot, but they gave me the life and the privilege to do and take these bets. Other people, I realize not many people can. I have so much more respect for people who have, you know, who are married, who are older, who have whatever circumstances, and still choose to dive into the deep end, into the unknown, and just figure shit out. So, you know, like again, but you know, there's this universal basic income, you know, kind of theory in the US nowadays, right? Where if you are able to pay somebody at least $1,000, $2,000 a day, where they can take care of their rent and so their food, their livelihood, their basic necessities, see what they can do, you know, otherwise.
Exactly.
That I believe that is, you know, my parents always gave me the opportunity, like, hey, for your dreams, we're willing to help you out here and there. I was able to raise some money from angel investors who allowed me to also stay focused on them full time. And you know, even in cases where you crash and burn, like okay, because of these people who keep helping, like basically revive you, you know, keep them close. Like there's so many people who I owe in my life. There's so many who I as many times as I could thank them, it wouldn't be enough. And there are only so many more people out there, I believe, like because I'm still figuring things out, right? I'm still looking for that one opportunity for like personally, which you know, God willing, my kids will never have to work again, right? But I don't want to give them that privilege of like, oh my God, we got Ferraris and mansions and stuff. I want to be able to reinvest in companies, like you know, social investment, invest for good while also earning money and being able to give back to community and stuff. So hopefully I'll find my sweet spot there pretty soon.
For sure.
But you know, it's
From my
in constant
side
pursuit. Yeah, no, thank you.
No, for sure.
And yeah, likewise, right? So it's just like meeting awesome people like you, and it's really just like in the future, if you come back to me like, hey, I'm trying to find something like this, or you know, I have come across this kind of opportunity. What do you think? And which I feel like even like 5-10 minutes, right? That's a quick phone call. It's so underappreciated because people are busy with whatever they're doing. So don't be afraid. If somebody hasn't responded, follow up. And until they say no, if it's very important to you, keep following up. Like, well, I know so many founders who got like an investment from an investor after like the 50th, you know, reminder email.
Oh my
And
God.
the investor, like it's piling up, you know, or an associate or an assistant is going to be taking a look at it, but they will be like, it actually happens. They'll be like, you know what? You are so persistent and annoying that the few minutes that you finally convinced me to see what you were offering, I'm like, okay, I'm willing to give you another 10 minutes now for me. Now close. Right. So, and that's all you want, right? Every opportunity, like every shot is it could be a make or break one. And like with startups, that's fun as well.
Mhm.
Like, but at the same time, it's not for everybody. So
That's also, yeah. But I'm hoping, honestly, like for me, there's just so much learning packed in this, like we've been like 1 hour, a little over an hour. I will
awesome.
literally want to like sleep on whatever we've discussed because there's so much learning. And thank you so much for sharing that, honestly.
I appreciate you taking the time and for
I
hearing me
appreciate
babble
that.
through all this. And best of luck with the series. It's pretty awesome. If there's anybody who, let me think of some other friends of mine who could be some good guests. But I think the show is awesome. I like the scrappiness, and I think this could be fun to watch in the future.
Thank you so
thank
much. Thank you. It means a lot.
All
But
right.
best of luck for any projects that you work on next.
Thank
Inshallah, I wish you all the best. And like I
Thank you
mentioned,
so much.
support always, honestly. So,
I appreciate it.
thank you so much.
All
And
right.
keep sharing on LinkedIn. That's just what
Right, thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. I'll keep trying. So
awesome. Thank you,
all right,
Saif.
thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
day.
Take care.
Bye.